Hey guys, probably going to put this video on our how to do stuff in Japan playlist, because if you spend some time in Japan you might get involved in a funeral or a memorial service. So it's, at least if you heard about it a bit before, it might give you a bit of a heads up. I actually did make a video about it years ago about some of the practicalities of going to a funeral here, about how you have to take some money in an envelope and all sorts of stuff like that. So that video is an old video somewhere on the how to do stuff playlist from years ago. If you search funerals, you'll find that. So what actually triggered this video is we actually did go to a memorial on the weekend, and I actually got some audio of it. It's a bit of a delicate thing, isn't it? You know, don't want to be videoing something like that. But it was okay for me to take a still picture and just get an audio of the Buddhist priest guy doing his thing. Was okay with the family, so I did that, and I'll put that at the end of this video so you can have a listen to that. But just a bit of background: if someone passes away in Japan, usually what they do is a Buddhist thing. Japanese people will often say to you that they are born Shinto and die Buddhist. And it's sort of a bit tongue-in-cheek. It's because usually when they're born, they have Shinto ceremonies for newly born babies. And then when they die, usually they have Buddhist ceremonies. I mean, not always, but this is generally the case. And that's why Japanese people say that they're born Shinto and die Buddhist. So usually what happens is the body will be either taken to a funeral place, and usually they have one room put aside, and they have usually an open coffin, and people can come and pay their respects. Sometimes they'll go to a funeral place, and then the funeral people do the preparation, and then they'll actually bring the coffin, an open coffin, back to the family home. And the person will be left there in the family home in the open coffin for people to come and show their respect. So actually, when we cleaned out the old farmhouse years ago, we actually found a photo there of some old person in a coffin in our tatami room, or in the tatami room of the old farmhouse, in an open coffin, and various photos from that time, of lots of flowers around the house and things like that when the person was laid out. And often they'll keep them in the house there for 2 or 3 days to allow people to come and go. And it's quite amazing for those of us who've come from cultures where we don't do that. It's pretty amazing to have a person laid out in a coffin, and you know, kids playing around and just life going on around them, you know. And they're very matter of fact about it. And it often, when people first experience it, it can often be a real spin out at first. It's like, whoa, that's really freaky, you know, and it sounds really freaky to some people. But in actual fact, it sort of does seem to make sense as you sort of experience it and see the people that, you know, the people who are related or close to the person who's died. It sort of gives them a really good slow chance to slowly say goodbye, you know, because they have this 2 or 3 days either at the funeral home or at the person's home, and people come and go. So if you're a close family member or a close friend, you'll often be involved in that every day. So you'll often have 2 or 3 days of just sort of sitting around. Usually it's quite formal, usually. Not always, but it can be quite formal, particularly at the funeral home, that the family just sort of sit there all day, and people come pay their respects to the family and to the deceased person, you know, and they'll come and they'll bow to the family. There's a whole ceremony involved, and the family sort of sit there and just sort of, you know, have people come and show their respect to them and to the deceased person for 2 or 3 days. And those funeral parlours usually have a little restaurant, and you'll sort of stop. So we've been involved in this a few times over the years, because we've had different older family members pass away, and I've had martial arts masters that have passed away, and so I've been involved in these a few times. And as a family member, you'll often just sit there, and people will be coming and going, and and then it's lunchtime, and you sort of off you go to these little cafeteria canteen places and sit there and eat lunch, and then you finish your lunch and then you go back downstairs and go back to sitting down there again in that room with the coffin and the flowers and things. And it can sound a bit sort of full on to people who aren't used to it, but it is a really slow goodbye. So you get that for 2 or 3 days or longer, and then usually what they have is usually they go to a crematorium, and then they have another service at the crematorium, and then they're cremated, and then the ashes are taken, and oh yeah, covered this on that previous video. The ashes are often, they come out with the ashes of lots of little pieces of bone and little boxes, and they give the close family members little boxes, and people can take bones from the main box, can take bones, little pieces of bone of the person, and put them in their own little box and take them home and put them in their own butsudan or their own kamizah in their house, kamidana, and sort of keep a little. That's your little piece of that person who's passed away. You take it home and put it in your own butsudan or in your own shrine in your house. That's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing if you've never experienced that before. Here's a box of ashes and bones, and help yourself sort of thing, and take it and put it in a box. So that's all within the first week usually, and then for the next few weeks you'll usually have a ceremony every week. So every Sunday, for example, you'll have a ceremony, and during that first week too, every day usually the Buddhist priest guy comes and does a ceremony in that room with the deceased person and the family. He'll come and do his whole thing, mantra thing, which you'll get to hear at the end of this video, and then so he does that every day for that during that first week, and then from then it's about once a week usually you'll have another ceremony in your own house, in the family house. So and usually in most older family houses they have the big butsudan thing, and so then the Buddhist priest will come to your house. So in our case it was the in-laws' house, so it was the mother-in-law and father-in-law's house, because it was their parents who'd passed away, right? So they have this ceremony in their house at their butsudan, and you have a picture of the person up on the wall, the people who've passed away. So sometimes people have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 pictures of people who've passed away up on the wall, and the Buddhist priest comes and he does his ceremony thing for maybe half an hour or so, and then he goes, and you have to sort of, even though you're in that family home, you sort of all have to dress up in black, and usually in a black suit. And then sometimes what they'll do is after the priest goes, you'll either sit and have a big lunch together, or you'll go off to a restaurant somewhere and have lunch together. That's quite common too, just sort of part of it. And that'll go on once a week for months sometimes, depending on how close the person was to you. And then it backs off to about once a month. You'll have a ceremony for them once a month. And then and during that first year too, there's all sorts of sort of rules during that first year about, or not rules, but sort of acceptable behaviour. You're not sort of supposed to celebrate anything during that year. So for example, the New Year thing, usually New Year people send out New Year cards to each other, but if you've had a close family member die during the year, usually you'll just send out a card that just says, sorry, I'm not participating in that this year because we had a family member die. Or other sort of celebrations, usually during that year you don't take part in any other sort of celebrations of anything, because you're sort of in mourning for a year, so you don't take part. There's all sorts of things, celebratory things, that you don't take part in. And then there's whole books written on this, by the way. We actually have one in our house. It's a book of etiquette, a really big thick book, as you can imagine, because Japanese etiquette's really complicated. And we've got a really big thick book, and quite often when it comes to things like this, we'll look up the book to see what we're supposed to do in certain circumstances. If a family member's died, what you're supposed to do and what you're not supposed to do, and if you're going to a funeral, what you should do and what you shouldn't do, and all sorts of rules and not rules but etiquette about these sorts of things. So usually that's for the first year, once a month you'll do it, and then after that, usually on the anniversary of the person's death, you'll do it. You'll have this ceremony thing, and the priest will come, the Buddhist priest will come to the house and do it. Now, the one I'm going to show at the end of this video, or you'll see a still photo, and you'll hear the mantra. It's because, it's a bit, you can't really set up a video camera and video something like that. Would be terribly inappropriate, wouldn't it? But it was sort of okay. I always sit at the back when we have these things because I'm big. If I sit anywhere else, I get in somebody's way. So I usually sit at the back, so I'm not sort of blocking anybody. And it was sort of okay to take a photo from behind because it wasn't sort of showing anybody's face, and it was okay to get the actual audio of the priest doing his thing. So that's sort of enough. So you're going to see a still picture of the family sitting in a small room in front of the Butsudan with the priest there doing his prayers and his mantra thing. Usually they have a thing sort of like what Christian people would call hymns, where there's actually little prayers, they're mantras really, they're Buddhist mantras, and sort of like a prayer book thing, and everybody sits there and does them with the priest. So, first he does his for 15 minutes, and then everybody together does them from these prayer books, which is quite moving actually when you get everybody doing it, because you'll get ladies' voices and kids' voices. Some of the older kids can do it, because they can read it and they can do it, and it can be quite moving, so then we do that every year, basically forever, really, to honour that person, and it sort of seems a bit much, if you've come from a different culture where usually we'll just have a funeral, won't we, and then we'll go home for a wake maybe, or go off somewhere for a wake and drink some beer and sort of celebrate the person's life, and then that's sort of it. Then after that, usually we just sort of remember the person, don't we? We don't usually sort of do any more ceremony than that. So at first, it can really seem a lot. It can really seem like, wow, that's a lot, that's a lot that they're doing there, or we're doing, because that's what happens is, next, Sunday after next, we've got to go to the family home for a ceremony for grandfather, okay, and then, a few months later, we've got to go to the family home for a ceremony for grandmother, and, it does seem like a lot, but when you sit there and watch the people that were close to them sitting there, it's sort of that slow process at first where it's every day, where you're doing the ceremonies every day, and you're sort of sitting there in a room quietly together, thinking about that person who's gone, and irrelevant of your religious beliefs or whether you have any or not, it's sort of that quiet time in a room, just focused on sitting there quietly thinking about the person who's gone. It's a really slow, gentle way of coming to terms with the fact that person's not around anymore. And, at first it can seem a little bit much, but as you experience it and you see the other people who are close to those people experiencing it, it's like the open coffin thing. At first that can seem really, whoa, But we actually had one with the grandmother where they had a big mountain of flowers, and everybody who came to say goodbye would go over to the coffin and pick up a flower and put it in the coffin with her, right? And slowly what happened is her whole body got covered in these little flowers, and the coffin slowly filled up with all these beautiful flowers until there was nothing left but just her face, and then all around her head and all over her body was covered in flowers, and all you could see was left of her was just her face, just absolutely covered in all these flowers, and they'd been put there one by one by different people, which is just, it was actually quite amazing, So quite often, at first, a lot of this stuff will come across as, whoa, that's a bit much. But in actual fact, it's quite, you can sort of see that it's got some benefit to the people who are left behind, that it's their way of slowly saying goodbye to these people, and it can be quite a touching and sort of good thing, you know, it can be a good thing. So yeah, so that was that. So I'm going to show you an image from that room, and you're going to hear the mantras, the Buddhist mantras, and there's a bit of ceremony that goes on during those memorials too. Everybody sort of sits around in seiza, sits around on their knees. It's sort of fairly formal. Sits around on their knees, and there's a little burner, a little hot coal thing, hot stone thing, and you sort of pick up a little bit of incense and put it on the hot stone thing, and it burns the incense, and it's you sort of say a prayer sort of thing. Or if you're not religious, you just put your hands together, and it's just a sign of respect, really. You know, these things can have different meanings to different people, you know, depending on your own beliefs. But, you know, you don't have to, all it really is showing respect. So if you're not religious, you're not into religious stuff, or you're not, you know, you've got different religious beliefs, it doesn't really matter. Probably the best way to look at it is it's just showing a sign of respect. Because for most Japanese people, a lot of Japanese people, that's often what it is anyway. It's not necessarily a big religious thing for them. It's just a cultural thing and a showing of respect thing, and, you know, some good thoughts towards that person who's gone. So anyway, it's a big topic. I always get the feeling with big topics like this that there's something else that I've forgotten to say, forgotten to tell you, but that's probably more than enough. So we're just going to leave you with the one image. I just took one image of the priest there with his back to the people with the butsudan. It's a fairly standard butsudan. We actually showed you a butsudan shop once where you can go to buy butsudan. Quite often the family ones are old ones that have been passed down and have big family history to them. In this case, that's the case. It's a really old one that's been passed down through the family. You'll see there's a candle burning. You might see up on the right hand side on the wall there's some images of grandfather and grandmother. It's all fairly standard. If you pretty well go to any older person's house, usually you'll see that. Even some young people's houses you go to that have new houses that you know have done the same thing in their own homes, it's not uncommon. So that's what you'll see, and then you'll just hear the priest doing his thing, doing his mantras, you know, and hopefully it'll give you a bit of a feel for it. Just we can't be shooting video in an environment like that, of course. There's a lot of things here that we experience that would be really good to show you that's just not appropriate to video, you know. A lot of the stuff that the only way to experience is really to be here and experience it for yourself, you know. But things like this, I think it's sort of important to, if we can, to get an idea of what it's like, because if you come here, what'll happen, I remember first time I ever went to a funeral in Japan was actually one of my martial arts masters, and I just got a phone call one day from someone else from the martial arts club who said, oh, you know, sensei's passed away, or, you know, Shihan's passed away, and we need to go to a ceremony today. That's often what will happen. There's a ceremony today. I'm going to come get you in 2 hours, you know. Put on a black suit, white shirt, black tie. Juzu is the thing we usually have too, is Buddhist beads. And again, it doesn't really matter if you believe in the Buddhist thing or not, you know, it's just a sign of respect, and it's just a cultural thing. You know, get your Juzu out and put on your black suit and black tie, and I'll come pick you up in an hour and a half, right? And then off we went, and because I had no idea, that was the first time I'd ever been to one of these things. And you just got to watch what everybody does and just do what they do. You know, you walk in, you bow to the family, you pick up the incense, put it on the hot stone thing, and, you know, put your hands together and bow and be respectful and sit quietly in the corner, you know, do what everybody else is doing. So anyway, hopefully that's given you a bit of an idea. So that's more than enough. So just have a listen to this. There's just one still image for you to look at while you're listening to it. Keep an ear out for the cameo appearance of the grandmother's cat. The old pussycat lives in their house. I don't know if it was the priest's mantras that was annoying the pussycat, or if it was the smell of the tasty things in the kitchen. But the pussycat got pretty noisy at one stage there. So anyway, have a listen to this.
ここに法名釈持徳面会法要を言修し立てまつる思うに如来の本願は我らの業苦を悲しみて現れたまい無下の法名は群青の無明をみそなわして照らしたも法俺によって罪深く悩み大きい我ら大悲の願線に乗じて生じの苦海を渡らしめなるしかれば如来の皆は悪を転じて徳となす知恵にして本郷の信心は疑いを除き悟りを得しむる真理なりこれまことに凡夫の終始やすき教えにして愚鈍の行きやすき道なりどこに釈尊の勧めを仰ぎて皆の本願を信じもっぱら念仏して異王の大道に帰し立てまつるああ如来の本願には多少にも愛がたく真実の信心は国交にも手堅したまたま良心を売れば遠く祝宴を喜ぶべきなり今幸いに同心同行の縁ここに結ばれ歓喜胸に三ついよいよ本読の深きことを知り如来広大の意徳をたたえ祭 し万人千人空一切大小人数いたつご名は尊者両本在尊者将願尊者称号尊者大号尊者人間尊者理空尊者名門尊者前日尊者豪徳尊者豪語尊者プロミンダガジョ尊者ガイアガジョ尊者ナダイガジョ尊者マカガジョ尊者シャリブズ尊者大門剣伝尊者ゴヒンダ尊者大樹尊者大樹尊者マガジュナ尊者マガジ尊者リジョ尊者ルガン尊者ゲンブ尊者メゾ尊者イジョ尊者リジョ尊者ガラク尊者ゼンデ尊者ラブ尊者アナカリョジトジョジュジャヤウヨダジョジュボダクウケンボダミョトクボダイジボダドジゲンゴジュイサイボダムゲンゴジョジュルジョジセジギボダジンデボダクムボダジツゲボダコウボダヘジョボダジドボダゴボダガンデボダコドボダホホボダジュジュボダセキョボダゲドボダガジュボゲナジジドリジセソジョゴエジョジジゲジョジョゴゲンゲゲドジャーナジョブジョジドジダゲンダボゲジョギガジョニゲゴズゴゴニセソジョゴエジョジジゲジョジョゴゲンゲゲジョベジョガヨジョヨリイヨゲンジョジョザズムジョミソセンジョジョブジョゴユネダジョガジンデゴゴニセソジュギルボゴニセボジブジョジョゴニセゲジドジヨゴニセヨジダジョドゴニセソギョジョレドゴレゲムブムドネクムゴムネジョブディアカゴイジゴゴナイニオゼゼドゴアナマウンガアナジョゼギョニョレモムニアイヒエゲモニゲゴアナミョブムムジョゼンラキョンガジャニイジョゲモジギニムズゴゼンダイアナジョモジゲモイジエキピョメンダイミセジュジョモジエギジョライムガダヒコアダンガショイジョゴモゼゴゼンドゴヨジョゴモエイシンジシレムリョモコナジナケユレズゲジジレズゴジョモジャダジョヤカケイタジョテニミアナドジジョレジョガコシナリョサジョドゴエゲムゲムルエズイジナジリドジュジゴクヤクテゴムジュムリョムガモジジョゴエジョフイクドジジゲムエゴゲムイジョイジャガジョレジョエグジョモイダイモジルジダアナダジョコニジョゼタイバイネガミョヨクモゴアナニジシウムミョテジダイモジョレモグドジョガミョグドダンダテケンゲムジョジジョゴジョムダニジムダドニモゴゴモムデモジンデエジョジモズムジョジョジノイケゴゲノギョダジョモコバボドコタユダジョデジョイケテジタイモジョラジョゲジョムズムジョダンドジョゲンガジョイジサマゴゲンギギイジムギョジョデミョムヨドジョニガズマニジョゴエジョガイソンペユジョジョムジョレヨゲンジョデムリジョゲデモコルジゴカモジョジサマチエピトムジョジョジョゲムジダデネジョムオガグジデムグデムグノダンドヨムリドジジジドムジョゴゴゴダジエジミョコミョイドジドデデガガダムダジョムモガドジョジミムゲダムデジョイカニジョイリョデサマチエイジョゴデルムトミョジガイダデヨイダヨダゲジヨムヨデモムリョダジョジョ
Hope somebody found that interesting. More videos coming soon.